Hi, my name is Mike Janisek. And that is my RX-7. I grew up in Duluth, Minnesota, born and raised. One of the things, especially growing up, I've always been around cars. That was kind of, as a kid, I was always the youngest. And everybody else had their trucks, and it was like Pontiacs and LeBarons and shit like that. Like, there wasn't anything really cool when I was growing up, like in, I would say, early 90s. But I was always into import cars. So import cars to me were like the muscle cars of before. And that's kind of when Garfield Avenue was kind of a really hip thing. And the cops would always bust the joint. And we would just hang out there as kids, you know, smoking cigarettes or whatever, trying to be cool. Cell phones weren't around. We had pagers. Like, that kind of ages me as to where I grew up in cars in that generation. And with the imports, a buddy of mine had a Honda, and first car I ever had, kind of regret it, getting rid of it actually, I regret that. It was a Honda Civic. And getting that car, I had a lot of head gasket issues or issues maintenance-wise with the car, and had to start working on it. So first couple things that I had to do were like sound systems, your exhaust mods, your intake mods, like that kind of stuff. And it was still a Honda single cam Civic, so it was slow. And a buddy of mine ended up purchasing a Mazda RX-7. And I was super intrigued by Mazda RX-7s just because they had this, you know, magical rotary engine. And with that, he actually started doing modifications, and we started doing more research and finding out what an actual rotary engine was. And before I could even drive his, I ended up buying one from a gentleman down the cities for $300 out of a field that didn't run. It was a first generation RX-7, and that's where it all started. Funny thing is when I got so involved into Mazda RX-7s, you know, I'm blessed with a family that really supports me in what I do, and they decided to get a convertible RX-7 to be able to go out and cruise with me and whatnot. My parents picked up beautiful midnight blue or sapphire blue convertible RX-7, and from that day I absolutely loved the convertibles. And with them driving it and having the time of their lives, and me being able to drive my car, I ended up actually purchasing their car from them because I wanted that convertible, and they were considering on selling it. And that's how I ended up with my car today. Is I bought it from my dad when I was 17 years old. So that was almost 20 years ago that I've had my RX-7, my convertible. And a lot of people would wonder how I ever ended up with a convertible RX-7. Well, I bought it from my parents. That's how I ended up with it. So it's pretty cool. To this day, when my parents come to like the racetrack and anything like that, like my mom literally had this car titled in her name. Isn't that tight though? Like a car that goes 9 seconds, my mom had it titled in her in her name. Originally, I worked for my uncle for years in diesel, and then I did like, you know, shit jobs just to buy car parts, right? Live at home with my parents, I don't care. And I had a great opportunity to move to Washington State in Puyallup, Washington, which is just south of Seattle. And this is back in like 1999, early 2000s, and worked for a company called Atkins Rotary, where they specialize in putting rotary engines in anything and everything. So I took the opportunity, went there, moved in with my aunt and uncle, who actually lived not very far from Atkins Rotary at the time, and worked there for like 6 years. Specifically, all I did was rebuild, port, build rotary engines, tear them down, learn everything from one of like the gurus, Dave Atkins, about rotary engines. Now, obviously, from where I was then to where I am now is completely different. Like, I've already put my own spin on it because back in 2000s, people weren't making 1,000 horsepower out of rotary engines, right? We were doing them as almost like resto mods, where people are basically just a savior to make them back streetable again on factory stock ECUs and all that jazz for just longevity. So I started making my own cocktail, so to speak, of a rotary engine developed and to how to make as much power as I possibly can out of it reliably. That's kind of where we are today, is I have an engine program that just works well for a rotary engine. And I've developed it, and most, I would say, 80% of the parts internally that I use inside of my engine is all Mazda OEM in a specific clearances and tolerances. And then I have other parts manufacturers that I've learned and been able to establish and research, develop their products with them over the years to kind of develop my own recipe for a rotary engine that has worked great success. IED Racing, I guess a lot of people wonder where that comes from. So I'm the owner operator of IED Racing, and with that we went through a lot of testing, and I broke a lot of shit through that. So everybody would say, oh, rotary engines aren't reliable. Well, I didn't have any issues breaking engines. I would break every drivetrain part behind the engine. So every time that we go to the track, I'd break like 3-4 axles, I broke transmissions, all in trying to launch the car and really drive the power and be able to pull as many RPM as you possibly can and shift at the same time and power shift the car. And obviously you're gonna have stuff fail. I would go through, re-inspect the engines, make sure compression checks, things of that nature, just to make sure I'm getting the most longevity out of what I'm building and being able to even give that to clients or potential people that want me to build their product. And I feel like it's been great over the past few years, but IED Racing was generally built specifically just to give, I guess, a slap in the face to everybody else that says that rotaries aren't reliable. And the other thing is it's an improvised explosive device. So IED Racing is improvised explosive device because of the fact that I built it myself and it could blow up at any time. And generally it's not the engine, it's going to be everything that's behind it. So even in my car currently today, it has a Mazda OEM S5 turbo block, which is 89 to 91 motor. It's a turbo motor, factory OEM motor from Mazda. And then behind that, I have a TKO 600 transmission, 5-speed, so it's like a Tremec TKO. And then I have a Ford 8.8 independent rear out of an Explorer diff. And then the gear ratio, everything's been changed around. So it's got a 430 gear ratio. The transmission's been completely faced, so the gears are faced, so I can basically just grab gears through the shifts where I can power shift it. So all that stuff, those were like the weakest links that I just had the most issues with. Now it's kind of fighting axles on that independent rear suspension, where it's just the actual shafts of the axles. So the CVs and everything like that, I actually built and developed outer CV axles to be able to withstand at whatever power levels, 1,000 plus wheel horsepower, in actually launching the car. Now I just break the shafts. So looking for somebody to supply me with some good shafts at some point in time. But always willing to try new things, always willing to try new products, and at least give an open mind to what that might be. And also willing to inform people. Like that's one of the things that I feel like is so underutilized, of people storing information in the rotary community and things of that nature, where like I feel like an open book, because I've tried a lot of stuff. I haven't tried everything, because there's always going to be somebody out there that's done something that I haven't done or can do something better than what I am doing now, where I can learn something. But also, I don't mind sharing the information that I've learned too. And I feel like the car community could use more people like that to be able to be more willing to share their experiences. And I feel like this is a great opportunity to be able to have your own YouTube channel or community channel that's able to show how inviting that this can be if you want it to be. When I originally got it, it was a daily driver for me in Washington. So when I moved to Washington, I daily drove this car for years. I while I was out there. And then I brought it back home. When I brought it back home, I actually did, the stock engine was a 6-port NA engine, and all I did was throw turbo rotors in it. So I used 93 to 95 third generation rotors in an NA engine, which you can kind of mix and match certain parts. They're all pretty much the same spec, just different compression ratios. And the funny thing is those rotors that I did, that NA block back in Washington and 20 some years ago, are the actual rotors that are in the car right now. That motor, it was just a single turbo. It was a little small Garrett, 55 millimeter turbo, T3, T4 housing on it, and the car made maybe 250, 300 wheel horsepower on a Microtech, super old school technology from Australia, no fail-safe stuff. So on that, super dangerous. If you run out of fuel or if you have ignition issues or anything like that, there's nothing to safety features to tell the engine for monitoring, oh, your oil pressure is low or your fuel pressure is low. Basically, that ECU will just destroy your engine. It'll be like, oh, we didn't see it. We're still making power though. So with that, ECUs and everything have just come leaps and bounds. I mean, to your own OEM manufacturer ECUs, they have ECUs out there. I would say Motec is pretty much your highest end. There's other really nice ECUs out there. Middle range, I use Heltec just because it's affordable. It has a lot of the features that you can get from a lot of the higher end ECUs. So Heltec is my go-to. That's what's on the car right now. It has one of their higher end models. It's got a Heltec 2500 ECU. With that, all engine protections. I mean, I probably have, I would say, up near 15 to 20 different sensors, just sensor monitoring everything that's going in the car. So if something goes weird on a run, if the car goes weird, the wheel speed sensors, anything like that, it can shut the car down or limit how much boost that it's giving. So a lot of safety features that are kind of just in the background doing what they need to do. With that, the engine itself is fully balanced from a company in Florida. So I used Balance Wiz is the company I used for balancing my rotating assemblies. I use E&J Apex seals, all factory OEM internal springs and seals for side seals, corner seals, rotor bearings. All my bearings are Mazda OEM crank. I use a liquid to air intercooler to cool the charge. Just switched out the turbo this year to a Precision 8385. So a little bit bigger frame T4 turbo. Divided intake manifold with twin tile wastegates, one for each rotor. With that, the exhaust is actually running a 4-inch outlet for the exhaust for the race. And for the street application, I run a full 3.5-inch exhaust. Out the back, so I have two different versions to that. We'd really like to see the car be able to compete this year in race week events. So race week is basically you go track to track. With that, you have to physically drive the car. You cannot trailer it. And it seems like a great event, so we're going to try it out this year. So there's two different fuel systems for the car. There's two different exhaust systems for the car. You have to take all the tools, have to be able to be carried in the vehicle. The only thing that you can have a mule, they call it, for is your fuel. Everything else you have to actually carry on the car. You can't have anybody transport anything for you, not even your tires. They have to be in the car. Or you can actually have a little mini trailer, but I'm not going to do that this year. I don't trust it yet, so we're going to see. But you'll see this car hopefully in the stick shift class for the Rocky Mountain Race Week is going to be one of our first events that we're going to do. And that's kind of the game plan for that. The biggest thing as to why I wanted to go to a street car setup is, for one, all the events that had happened in the past year, especially with the whole COVID situation. It really opened my eyes to say, okay, all these events that are happening are all like cruise events. They're not really like drag racing specific, or if they're drag racing specific, you got to be of drive your car, like street car type deal. So it's like, I kind of have to be able to look if I can get the best of both worlds, as well as kind of make a major focus on one thing, and that's, make the car straightable, be able to go to cruise events, go to cars and coffees, things of that nature, car meets, hang out with my buddies, and not have an issue where, oh, my car can only drive 5 minutes and then I got to charge it, or I'm out of fuel and I need to put different fuel in it. So that's kind of why I was able to, or that's kind of why I switched around, put on the alternator, changed around the location for the liquid air intercooler, added a different fuel cell to it, and added different ducting, oil coolers, keep everything cool for long distance driving. And the ECU is fully capable of it too. That's the other nice thing with the Heltec. Having all those different features in there, you have so many different maps that you can say, oh, I want to base my boost off of what fuel compensation I have for ethanol content, or all those type of things, so that you can make it easy to drive. Granted, the car is still a race car, and it still takes some finesse to drive it, but it's super fun. All the looks and the head turns that you get when you're in something like this, I mean, it's just worth it. And it brings a smile to people's face, something that they've never seen before. So it's pretty cool. Hopefully now with this setup, the goal is to just basically limit out the cage, whatever the cage certification is. If the car can go 8.5 seconds in a quarter mile with a stick shift, I mean, that's hella cool. That's a hard record for anybody to beat. I'll tell you that right now. And right now, there's nobody really close to getting into the nines. I mean, within a half second. I mean, it's doable. It's not impossible, but we'll see who's out there. Because as soon as if somebody else beats my record, I'm just going to try to go for it again. So, yeah.
So this is currently, you're saying, the world's fastest rotary powered, or overall convertible RX-7?
Overall, the world's fastest convertible RX-7. So currently right now, this car, the record prior to was a 10.2 at 138 or 136 miles an hour. Last year, we did a 9.6 at 145. So that technically, and that car that held the record at a 10.2 was actually a LS powered, turbo LS powered RX-7. So technically right now, we have the world's fastest Mazda RX-7 convertible. And there's not anybody that could ever challenge it, because I stay up on that to make sure that I still got the fastest if anybody's watching. I'm Mike with ID Racing. Thanks for checking out the RX-7.
$9.95 at 126, you son of a bitch.